When people talk about the golden age of flying, it almost sounds unreal, like a romanticized memory from a movie. But Pan Am made it real. This was the airline where stepping onto a plane felt closer to walking into a private club than catching public transportation. The crisp uniforms, the polished silverware, the champagne, everything about it whispered prestige. I was just a kid when Pan Am collapsed in 1991, so I never got to see it myself. But every time I hear older travelers describe their flights, I can't help but feel a little envious. They talk about it the way some people talk about their first car or their favorite record, something personal, something tied to who they were. Flying wasn't just a way to get somewhere, it was part of your identity. And that's what makes Pan Am's story so fascinating. How does a company that defined glamour in the sky, that once felt untouchable, vanish completely? To me, it's more than just a business case. It's a reminder that even the biggest symbols of an era can disappear, leaving only stories, memories, and a logo that still makes people nostalgic. Pan Am's story officially began in 1927 with a single flight from Key West, Florida to Havana, Cuba. On paper, it doesn't sound like much, just another small airline starting out. But in hindsight, that moment feels like the first step toward redefining international travel. From the very beginning, Pan Am was aiming higher than anyone else. The man behind it all was Juan Trippe, a young Yale graduate with a vision that bordered on obsession. He didn't just want an airline, he wanted the airline that would carry America's image across the globe. By the 1930s, his dream was already taking shape. Pan Am's famous Clipper flying boats began crossing oceans, and suddenly places that once felt unreachable, Rio, Hong Kong, Paris, were a ticket away. What stands out to me is how Pan Am wasn't just a business, it was practically a wing of U.S. foreign policy. With strong government support, the airline was granted exclusive international routes, almost as if Washington had decided this is America's flag in the sky. That's the kind of backing most modern airlines could only dream of. When I think about this era, I picture the mix of excitement and fear people must have felt stepping onto those massive flying boats for the first time. Air travel was still new, almost experimental, yet Pan Am wrapped it in a package of luxury and confidence. It set the stage for decades of dominance to come. By the 1950s and 60s, Pan Am wasn't just growing, it was booming. The airline became the face of the jet age, launching the first commercial Boeing 707 flights across the Atlantic. Then came the Boeing 747, the jumbo jet that changed everything. Pan Am was the first to put it into service in 1970, and for a while, it felt like every major innovation in aviation had Pan Am's fingerprints on it. This was the era when flying Pan Am meant something. You weren't just traveling, you were stepping into a lifestyle. Their stewardesses, always immaculately dressed, became cultural icons. Their posters and ads sold not just destinations, but dreams. And honestly, I get why people still look back at this era with so much nostalgia. Even I catch myself flipping through old Pan Am ads and thinking, wow, air travel actually looked fun once. But what made Pan Am's growth so remarkable was how global it was. While most airlines still thought regionally, Pan Am was connecting continents. It wasn't unusual to see their iconic globe logo in cities all over the world. London, Tokyo, Rio, Nairobi. The airline practically turned itself into a brand that symbolized internationalism. Looking back, it feels like Pan Am reached a level very few companies ever do. It wasn't just an airline, it was a cultural institution. And that's what makes its eventual collapse so shocking. For decades, Pan Am looked unstoppable. But the bigger the company grew, the more fragile it actually became. By the 1970s and 80s, the cracks that would eventually bring it down were everywhere. And the strange thing is, none of these problems on their own would have killed Pan Am. It was the combination that proved fatal. The first big blow was the oil crisis of 1973. Overnight, the cost of jet fuel skyrocketed, and Pan Am's fleet, loaded with new Boeing 747s, suddenly became a financial anchor. The 747 was an incredible aircraft, a marvel of engineering, but it was also massive and expensive to operate. Airlines needed full cabins to make them profitable. For Pan Am, those cabins didn't always fill, especially on long-haul routes. It's like buying a mansion when you can barely afford the heating bill. I sometimes wonder if Pan Am had simply waited on the 747, maybe they would have bought themselves more time. Then came deregulation in 1978. The U.S. government opened the domestic market, and suddenly Pan Am was at a huge disadvantage. Unlike American, United, or Delta, Pan Am didn't have a strong domestic network. Its strength was in international flights. But deregulation meant competitors could now undercut prices and funnel passengers from their domestic routes into international ones. Pan Am scrambled to catch up, but without that feeder network, it was like playing chess while missing half the pieces. In a desperate attempt to fix this, Pan Am bought National Airlines in 1980 for $437 million. On paper, this gave them the domestic routes they needed. In reality, it was a disaster. National was a poor cultural fit, the integration was messy, and Pan Am loaded itself with massive debt right as the economy was entering another downturn. It reminds me of those acquisitions you read about today, where a company pays billions just to catch up in a market they've been ignoring, only to regret it later. Meanwhile, Pan Am kept selling off assets to stay alive. They sold their iconic Manhattan headquarters, the Pan Am Building, in 1981. They sold their profitable routes to London and Tokyo. Every sale bought them short-term cash, but weakened the core business. By the late 80s, Pan Am was a shadow of its former self, holding on to less and less of what had once made it great. And then came the tragedy of Lockerbie in 1988, when Pan Am Flight 103 was destroyed by a bomb over Scotland, killing 270 people. Beyond the immense human loss, it destroyed what was left of Pan Am's reputation. The public associated the airline with lax security, and bookings plunged. It wasn't fair. Terrorism can strike any airline, but Pan Am never recovered from the stigma. When people lose trust, especially in something as sensitive as aviation, it's almost impossible to win it back. Add to this the Gulf War in 1990, which caused fuel prices to spike again and cut demand for international travel, and Pan Am simply couldn't survive. By 1991, they filed for bankruptcy. A company that once symbolized the very best of American aviation had collapsed completely. When I look at Pan Am's fall, I don't see just one mistake. I see a perfect storm. Expensive aircraft bought at the wrong time, deregulation that exposed structural weaknesses, a bad acquisition, asset sales that hollowed out the company, and a reputational disaster. To me, the saddest part is how inevitable it all feels in hindsight. Pan Am wasn't just competing against other airlines, it was competing against history, economics, and bad timing. And that's a fight no brand can win forever. Pan Am officially shut down in December 1991, but its name never truly disappeared. Over the years, a few attempts were made to revive the brand. Small charter services, even a regional airline in the late 1990s using the Pan Am logo, but none of them lasted. Today, the original company is gone, but its legacy lingers in surprising ways. The famous globe logo still pops up in pop culture, in movies, on retro fashion, even on collectible merchandise. For many, it represents not just an airline, but an entire era of optimism about air travel. When I see that blue globe, I don't think of bankruptcy. I think of old posters promising exotic destinations, of a time when flying felt like a privilege. There's also a kind of cultural nostalgia around Pan Am that few defunct companies ever achieve. No one wears T-shirts celebrating Eastern Airlines or TWA, but Pan Am, people still do, and that tells me something important. While Pan Am failed as a business, it succeeded in creating an identity strong enough to outlive the company itself. Pan Am's story is one of glamour, ambition, and ultimately fragility.
It rose higher than almost any airline before it, only to collapse under the weight of economic shocks, poor timing, and strategic missteps. For me, the most striking part isn't just that Pan Am disappeared, it's that the memories of its golden age remain so vivid, even decades later. That tells you how powerful a brand can be, even after the business is gone. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Pan Am was doomed by forces beyond its control, like deregulation and fuel crises? Or was it brought down mainly by bad management decisions? Could a company like Pan Am survive in today's airline industry? Or was it always destined to be a relic of its time?